I finished my master's degree in economics. There were no balloons, no big parties, no loud congratulations, but I felt proud. Not many people knew how hard it had been. I worked almost full time during the program. There were days when I would leave the office, go straight to campus, sit through evening lectures half awake, and then come home too tired to eat. My weekends were filled with assignments, group calls, and late nights staring at financial models. I rarely saw my friends. I missed birthdays, skipped dinners, and learned to live with the guilt of always saying, maybe next time. Still, I pushed through. Some days I thought about quitting. The stress was too much, the sleep too little. But something deep inside kept me going. Maybe it was the feeling that I owed it to myself. Maybe I just wanted to prove I could do it. Every small step mattered. Passing exams, finishing papers, showing up even when I felt invisible. It all built toward one moment. When I got the email with the graduation date, I just stared at it for a few seconds. 15th of June. It felt like a quiet sign. The middle of the year. The middle of my life, in a way. I printed it and taped it to the fridge like it was a promise I had made and finally kept. That piece of paper reminded me of everything I had survived. I looked at it every morning while making coffee, and every evening when I came home exhausted. It became something more than a date. It was a mark of everything I had worked for, every silent sacrifice, every choice no one saw. I didn't want a big celebration. I wasn't looking for attention or gifts. I didn't need applause. I just wanted a day that felt like mine. A moment where I could breathe and say, I made it. My idea was simple. I'd wear the robe, take some photos, maybe say a few words if the school allowed speeches. Then I'd have a quiet dinner with my parents and a couple of close friends. Maybe light candles, maybe not. Nothing fancy. Just warm food, familiar faces, a small toast, and the calm sense of ending one chapter and beginning another. I imagined that day so many times. I thought about what I would wear, how my hair would look, whether I'd cry when I stepped on stage. I wasn't expecting perfection, just peace. For once, I wanted to be seen not as someone who's always managing or doing okay, but as someone who had actually achieved something. I didn't want to explain how hard it was. I didn't want anyone to pretend to understand. I just wanted that moment to exist, untouched and mine. Everything was set. I booked a small table at a restaurant my parents liked, a place that had soft lighting and quiet corners. I confirmed my gown rental and started planning what shoes to wear that wouldn't make my feet hurt. My best friend offered to help with photos, and I had saved a little to print a few of them as gifts. Even the weather forecast looked good. Warm, but not too hot. A rare, perfect day in June. At night, I would lie in bed and think about what I might say if I was asked to speak. I'd thank the professors who didn't give up on me, the classmate who shared notes when I missed lectures, the coffee shop near campus that stayed open late. I'd thank myself for showing up again and again, even when everything inside me said to stop. I'd keep it short, honest, real. It wasn't just a graduation, it was a quiet victory, a turning point I had built piece by piece, often in silence. I didn't tell many people about the ceremony, just those who had stood by me, even in the smallest ways. I wasn't looking for a crowd. I was looking for meaning. And I believed, with all my heart, that on June 15th, I would finally have it. Sarah called in the evening. Her voice was bright and full of energy, like she had just won something big. She sounded excited, almost like she had great news to share. I remember standing in my kitchen, holding my phone with one hand and a glass of water in the other. I was tired from work, mentally going over a checklist of everything I still needed to do before graduation. When I heard her voice, I smiled at first, expecting her to talk about dresses or flowers or guest lists, but what she said next made my heart stop for a moment. They had moved the wedding date. It was now scheduled for June 15th. I didn't answer right away. I just stood there, still holding the phone, not sure if I had heard her right. She kept talking, explaining why it made sense. More guests would be available on that day. The venue was offering a discount for mid-June. Everything had lined up so perfectly, she said, like the universe was helping her out. She even joked about how lucky she was to get such a deal. Then she mentioned my graduation, almost as an afterthought, like it was something small. She said she knew it was my big day too, but she was sure I wouldn't mind. I could still come to the wedding after the ceremony. She said it like it was a small request, like it was easy to just switch plans, move feelings around, and smile through it. I remember feeling numb. It was like someone had taken something important from me and didn't even realize it. In my head, I kept hearing the same thought again and again. It was my day. Just one day. The only day in years that was supposed to be mine. And now it wasn't anymore. Now it belonged to her. I wanted to say something. I wanted to ask how she could just take the one day I had been holding on to through so many long nights and turn it into her celebration. But no words came out. I just stood there, letting her keep talking. She didn't sound worried. She didn't ask if I was okay with it. She didn't pause to wonder how it might feel for me. She was too excited, too sure that I would understand, because I always did. At some point in the call, I reminded her that I had helped with the wedding. I had sent her money for the deposit when she was panicking about losing the venue. I had told her it wasn't a loan, but I thought maybe she would still remember that it mattered, that it came from my savings. I thought she might at least say thank you or offer to find another solution. But she just laughed, a soft, cheerful laugh that made me feel even smaller. She said I helped because I wanted to, because I was family. That's what family does, right? Help without expecting anything in return. I didn't answer. After the call, I sat in silence for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, staring at the fridge. The paper with the graduation date was still taped to it, slightly curled at the edges. I had looked at it every day, imagining a quiet celebration, picturing my parents smiling across the table, maybe taking a photo outside in the evening sun. But now all of that felt far away, like it didn't belong to me anymore. It wasn't just about the date. It was about the feeling, about always being the one who steps aside, always the one who adjusts, who gives, who understands. Sarah knew she could count on that. She knew I wouldn't make a scene. She knew I'd stay quiet, even if it hurt. And the worst part was, she was probably right. I'd been quiet for so long that it had become second nature. I'd gotten used to swallowing disappointment, pretending it didn't sting when someone else's needs came first. But this time, it felt different. This time, something in me started to shift. I stayed up late that night, walking around my apartment, trying to decide what to do. Should I say something? Should I ask her to change the date back? Should I cancel my dinner, skip the photos, pretend it was never important? I didn't know. I just knew that for once, I didn't want to be the one to step aside. Not again, not this time. 400,000 rubles. That was my savings. It wasn't just money sitting in a bank account. It was years of saying no to little things I wanted. It was skipping vacations, buying only what I needed, and watching every ruble. It was the decision to keep using an old phone instead of getting a new one. It was walking instead of taking a taxi. It was working late shifts, picking up freelance projects, and counting every hour I spent to earn just a bit more. That money wasn't just a number. It was every small choice I had made for my future. I had different dreams for that money. A solo trip to a place where I could finally breathe. A little home of my own, even if small. A down payment on a quiet apartment with a window that caught the morning light. A space where I could have my books, my tea, and a bit of peace. That money was meant for that life. A life I had carefully built in my head, step by step. Nothing big or flashy, just something that was mine. When Sarah called and said that everything would fall apart without an urgent down payment for the venue, I didn't argue. I didn't ask why things had been left so last minute. I didn't ask why no one else in her life could help. I just said I'd send it. I transferred the money within the hour. No questions, no conditions. She was panicking, and I wanted to help. She was my sister. I thought, in some quiet way, that this would mean something. That even if I didn't make speeches or show off my efforts, she would remember. Not just the money, but the moment. The sacrifice. The trust. I didn't expect a grand thank you, but I hoped, deep down, that she would carry it in her heart, that when it came time to make decisions about her wedding, she would pause for a second and think about me, my schedule, my one day, my quiet moment that I had waited so long for. I thought maybe, just maybe, she would look at her calendar and say, "No, that day is already taken." But she didn't. She didn't pause. She didn't ask. She just took the date, moved the wedding to it, and acted like everything was perfect. When I told her maybe we could talk about a different day, maybe she could shift the wedding again, she dismissed it quickly. She said it didn't matter. She said I wasn't the bride anyway. Those were her words. Simple, direct, and sharp. I wasn't the bride, so my day didn't matter. I stared at the message for a long time. It felt like cold water, as if all those years of holding everything together, of being the quiet helper, had meant nothing. Not even enough for one day of consideration. She didn't even try to soften the words. There was no pause, no attempt to meet me halfway, just a blunt sentence that made something in me shut down. I didn't respond. For the first time in a long while, I just put my phone away. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I finally understood that whatever I said wouldn't be heard. It would just bounce off that wall of casual entitlement, that place where my feelings had never really mattered, unless they were convenient. That night I sat in my room with the lights off. The glow from the streetlight outside flickered on my wall. I thought about how many times I had played the role of the quiet, helpful one. How many times I had smiled when I felt like crying. How many times I had given things up with the hope that someone would remember, would see, would care. This time, I didn't cry. I didn't try to fix anything. I didn't write a long message explaining how I felt. I just stayed silent. And in that silence, something became clear. This wasn't just about the money or the date. It was about being invisible for too long, about always being the one who gives, while everyone else takes. And suddenly, I felt tired of it. Not angry, not bitter, just tired in a way that made me realize I didn't want to explain myself anymore. A week before the date, I got an email. It wasn't a message asking how I was or checking in about graduation. It was a list, a long list of tasks. Meet the guests when they arrive. Help the photographer organize people. Say a few words after the toast. There was even a note saying I was perfect for it because I always know how to speak well. As if that was all I was to them, someone who could stand and smile and say nice things when needed. As if that day, the one I had been waiting for, was just another chance to be useful. I sat in my small dorm room, the printed diploma resting in my hands. I had just picked it up that morning. The paper felt heavier than I expected, not because of its size, but because of what it meant. It was proof of everything I had worked for. Late nights, early mornings, long hours of studying with tired eyes, working shifts, writing papers between meetings, skipping weekends out. It was supposed to be a moment of pride. A closing chapter. A breath after years of holding it in. Outside the window, the campus was alive. People were laughing, taking pictures in their gowns, practicing speeches in front of the mirror. Some were crying, hugging friends they might not see again. There was music playing from somewhere nearby, and the sound of someone dragging a suitcase down the hallway. The whole building felt full of endings and beginnings, and I was supposed to be part of that. I had earned the right to be part of that. But inside my room, I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel excitement. I felt something else, something hollow. Because while everyone outside was preparing for one of the most meaningful days of their life, I was sitting with a list of wedding tasks someone had decided I should do. No one had asked if I was free that day. No one had asked if I wanted to help. No one had even said congratulations. I wasn't invited. I was assigned. That realization stung more than I thought it would. I had always tried to believe the best in people, that maybe they forgot because they were busy, that maybe they didn't mean to overlook me, but this time, it was too clear. I wasn't just overlooked. I was used. I was treated like a piece of furniture that could be moved into place when needed. A reliable voice, a pair of helpful hands, but never someone who mattered on her own. I looked at the email again. The polite tone, the cheerful wording, the expectation that I'd just say yes without question. As if it was obvious that I'd show up and do my part. Like I had nothing else happening that day. Like my own plans didn't exist. I thought about how they probably sent the same message to others. Maybe some cousins. Maybe a few friends. But even then, I doubted they were told what to do. I doubted anyone else was given a task list like they were hired help. I stared at my phone for a long time. My fingers hovered over the screen. I didn't want to explain. I didn't want to beg to be seen. I didn't want to send a long message full of polite excuses. I was done trying to soften the truth. I typed out 3 simple words. I won't come. Then I put the phone down. The moment after I sent that message, I felt something shift. Not guilt, not fear, just calm. Like I had finally said what I needed to say. I looked at my diploma again, and this time, I smiled. Not a big smile, just a quiet one. Because for once, I chose myself. Not out of anger, not to make a point, but because I was tired of being chosen only when it was convenient. The sun outside was starting to set. The light turned golden on the trees just beyond the window. I watched it for a while, sitting in the silence of my room, and thought about how good it felt to finally stop explaining myself, to finally say no. Not to hurt anyone, not to cause drama, just to protect a piece of myself that had been ignored for too long. The wedding happened. I didn't go. I spent the day quietly at home, trying not to think about it, but of course I did. I wondered how the weather was. I wondered what flowers she had picked. I wondered if our parents smiled in the family photos without me. I didn't check my phone much. I stayed off social media. But in the evening, while I was drinking tea and watching the light fade outside my window, I gave in. I opened one app, and there it was. The first video already posted, bright and loud and full of people. The clip was short. Someone had filmed the moment Sarah walked down the aisle. She looked beautiful. She wore a white dress with lace sleeves, her hair curled softly, her smile wide and glowing. Everyone stood and clapped. Some people even cried. It looked like something out of a movie, the kind of scene we grow up imagining for ourselves, even if we later pretend not to care. In that video, she looked happy. She looked like the center of the world. I watched in silence. Then the camera moved. It caught Steve, the groom, standing at the altar. He was holding a phone. At first, I didn't think much of it. Everyone checks their phone. Maybe he was nervous. Maybe it was a timer for music or vows. But then something strange happened. He looked down at the screen, paused, and took a small step back. His face changed. He looked surprised, maybe even confused. One of his friends leaned in and whispered something to him. Steve nodded slowly, not taking his eyes off the phone. There was a small sound in the background, the soft ding of a message arriving. He opened it, and that was the end of the clip. I didn't need to see more. I knew what the message was. I had sent it earlier that morning. Just one line. No drama, no questions, no anger. Just words I had held in for a long time. You're an adult now. You're responsible for everything on your own. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't revenge. It was simply a boundary, written quietly and clearly. I turned off my phone and placed it face down on the table. I didn't look again. I didn't want to see comments or more photos. I didn't want to read long captions about love and support and family when I knew the truth beneath the surface. I didn't want to scroll through pictures of a celebration I had helped pay for but wasn't welcome at. I didn't want to see smiles from people who hadn't even asked why I wasn't there. Instead, I cleaned up the kitchen. I folded laundry. I watered the plant on the windowsill. I took a long shower and let the hot water wash away the heavy feeling in my chest. It didn't disappear completely, but it softened a little. Enough to breathe. That night, I lay in bed and thought about how strange it was that everything had changed, and yet nothing had changed at all. Sarah was married now. The wedding had gone on without me. People laughed, danced, toasted. My absence probably raised some eyebrows, maybe even some gossip. But I wasn't there to explain. I wasn't there to make anyone comfortable. I was just not there. And that was the point. I chose not to watch the rest of the videos, Not because I was angry, but because I didn't want to watch myself being erased. I didn't want to see my name left out of speeches or my face missing from family photos. I didn't want to hear how beautiful everything was while pretending that what they had done to me didn't matter. Sometimes not being there is the only way to protect yourself. Sometimes silence is the clearest answer you can give. I had spent years being the one who showed up, who helped, who stayed quiet so others could shine. But that night, as I lay under a soft blanket in my quiet room, I finally felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not perfect, not complete, but real and mine. A month after the wedding, my phone rang. It was my mother. I almost didn't answer. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then picked up. Her voice was calm, but I could tell something was wrong. She said Sarah was having issues with getting the deposit back from the venue. There was a delay, or a problem with the contract, something like that. Then she asked if I could help. The words were soft, careful, as if she knew this wasn't going to be an easy conversation. I listened quietly. When she finished, I answered in a quiet, steady voice. I already helped. 400,000. That was my gift, my goodbye. She didn't say anything after that. Just a pause. Then the call ended. No shouting, no guilt, just silence. And after that day, no one else called. Not Sarah, not our parents, not even one of the aunts or cousins who used to message me for birthdays or holidays. It was as if I had quietly closed a door, and they didn't know how to knock anymore. Maybe they thought I was being cold. Maybe they were waiting for me to come around like I always did. But I didn't. I had nothing left to give. Around that time, I started a new job. It wasn't anything flashy, but it paid well and gave me space to think. I rented a small apartment near the bay. It wasn't big, but it had large windows and the kind of quiet I had missed for years. I could see the water from my kitchen if I leaned just right, and the mornings felt softer there. I unpacked slowly, one box at a time, putting things where they felt right. It was the first space that felt truly mine. No voices telling me what I should do. No lists, no expectations, just walls and peace. On the weekends, I started baking again. Nothing fancy, just simple pies with berries or cinnamon or cardamom. I liked the way the smell filled the kitchen and made the apartment feel warm. It reminded me of the life I wanted. Not loud, not crowded, just full in its own quiet way. Sometimes I would bring a pie to the office on Monday. Sometimes I would keep it all to myself and eat a slice with tea on Sunday evening, watching the sky change color outside the window. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. I didn't post updates. I didn't reach out with long explanations or dramatic messages. I had said what I needed to say in my own way, and that was enough. There's something powerful in not explaining yourself anymore, in not trying to convince people why your choices are valid. I wasn't angry. I wasn't waiting for apologies. I just moved forward. And that was new for me. For most of my life, I thought love meant saying yes. Saying yes even when it hurt. Saying yes so that no one else would feel uncomfortable. Saying yes so the family stayed together, even if it meant I was the one carrying the weight. But now I see things differently. Sometimes love means letting go. Sometimes it means stepping back so you don't lose yourself trying to be enough for people who don't see you. Silence can be love too. Not the cold kind. The kind that's honest, grown. Without strings or guilt. The kind that says, I care about you, but I care about myself too. I don't wish bad things for them. I hope Sarah figures things out. I hope our parents find peace with the choices they've made. But I'm no longer the person who rushes in to fix everything. I'm no longer the fallback. Some days I walk by the bay with a cup of coffee. I listen to the wind and watch the boats in the distance. I think about how far I've come. Not in money, not in titles, but in how I carry myself. I don't carry silent pain anymore. I don't carry old roles that were never mine to begin with. I carry peace. And that, I've learned, is more than enough.